Sahana Vavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavaditam Astu Mavidvishavahai. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. May that one protect us. May that one nourish us. May we work together in full cooperation. May our study be full of illumination. And may we not unnecessarily quarrel with each other. Peace, peace, peace be unto all. The topic for this evening will be divine insight. And we were saying that ordinary sight is not insight necessarily, because ordinary sight takes on surface movements and surface events. If we want to go some deeper than that, we have to look internal to that. Now, science, of course, is looking internal in many ways, but still science is only looking at the material, the thing that is changing. And so there's a text, part of the Bhagavatam, which is published as Last Message of Krishna, Sri Krishna, chapter 24. We can take the 12th to the 22nd verses. And there we find a few direct statements. So the first thing we find is, with a pure mind, one should observe in all beings as well as in oneself, only me, the Atman, who am both inside and out and unobstructed like the sky. In this system, there's no creation, there's no potter making a created world from a wheel. There's no duality in this. It's God himself that in all creatures, we can see the Creator. That is, every manifested entity, everything that has a shape and a utility is included. And so Sri Krishna is saying, only me, that is only the Supreme Lord of the universe, that entity that is a creator, that is in all beings, as well as in oneself, in the person who says, oh, that Lord is in all beings, it's also in oneself, because all includes all. It's not just one or two people or one or two things. It's not those that we favor and those that we don't. It's not those that are in a beautiful scenario, something that we generically call nature. We're all part of nature. So it's in all of those things. But how would we observe it? We require some insight, and the insight comes from a pure mind. Come without any hurt is the invitation. Something like the pure blue sky. We had a meditation earlier on that. We had some technical difficulties on that as well. But if you're able to imagine a sky that is unblemished by any cloud, pure blue, that kind of thing, the beauty about it is there's nothing that obstructs it. It is completely unobstructed. There's no beginning, no end to it. You can imagine an infinite blue sky with no beginning, no end, something that indicates endlessness. And somehow when we view that, we get an internal shift upwards, an internal kind of inspiration. And so, in the same way, in spite of all the differences in names and shapes and utilities, which we experience as human beings, in all of these, including ourselves, one should be able to see only the Lord and nothing else. But what do we normally see? We only see the surface things, because the mind is not pure. How to get a pure mind? A pure mind is a mind that is not selfish. A mind that has no first person singular and also no future tense. Future tense brings us anxiety, and first person singular brings us egocentricity, where we make a world where me and my and all those concerns orientated around an egoistic position is the central reference point. How do we get away from that? And what will be the view of somebody who has a pure mind? The next few stanzas will tell us. It says, O great soul, he who taking his stand on pure knowledge thus regards and honors all beings as myself, who has the same attitude towards even the lowest person in the social strata, some entity that is called a Chandala. We have to explain this term, as well as somebody of the highest in the social structure, a Brahmana, a thief, as well as a patron of the Brahmanas, a spark of fire, as well as the sun, and a ruffian or a thief, as well as a kind man. All should be considered with the same viewpoint. So let's examine what all this means. When it says, O great soul, he who taking his stand on pure knowledge, that is, only devotion can only become steady when knowledge itself is secure and solid. Where there is a slight discrepancy in our knowledge, we can't get the devotion. That is why we teach the philosophy. We want to give you a stable platform that allows devotion to happen. There must be a reason why we love. And so we have to take our stand on pure knowledge. It's no good somebody giving us a doubt. Oh, you're worshiping this kind of God. That's wrong. You're doing it wrong. You should be doing this instead of that. Raising a doubt. The conviction about where we stand has to be solid. It has to be firm. We have to have unwavering conviction, and then devotion comes. Thus regards and honors all beings as myself. When we see things for what they are, when we look through the trivia, when we look through all the oscillations of this life, underneath what will we find? We will find that entity. And when we find it, we see that it's the same entity within us, and it's the same entity that we consider to be God, the highest principle, the highest example. So what will somebody's view be who takes this position? They will see that that person will honor all beings as myself. See, the language has changed. So seeing all beings in oneself has now changed to as. What should we view? Now, in the old days, a Chandala was the illegitimate offspring of a Brahmana, that is the highest in the social system, and with the lowest in the social system. A Brahmana woman who has a child by a Shudra is, in the old days, called this Chandala. But we can have some different view of it. We can take anybody who seems to be low in society. We were discussing with some devotee a few days ago, is there any such thing as the caste system, the Indian caste system, in European society? I said, yes, because as long as you have class, and in some social circles, there is a higher caste or upper class and a lower class. Some people live in South Dublin and some people live in North Dublin. And there seems to be a divide, you know. And although we deal with these things with a kind of sense of humor, still what is inside all of that? And then you'll find people who are less educated than others, who are coarser in their culture, who didn't get the same social or job or economic opportunities that somebody else got. It is easy in a country which is developing and has a level of poverty to see that all the people surrounding a car begging for food, for example, become so commonplace, we don't even think about it. We bypass it. So it takes us a certain level of insight to discover the divinity in all beings, including and especially those we take for granted, all those we rate as a lower social class. So the old definition, of course, was like that, referring to illegitimately, wrong way of marrying, that kind of thing. But it's suggestive of differences in birth and difference in social status, difference in fortunes. All of that can be highlighted. So as well as somebody of the highest status, if you view this, then all the social class and all the difficulties and all the injustices that we come across will all go away. All those problems will disappear. There will be an equal way of dealing with a society, a fair way, a just way of dealing with everybody. And a thief as well as a patron of the brahmanas, somebody who sponsors good works, charities, somebody who reads the scriptures, somebody of high learning, as well as a thief, somebody who gets his living by robbing others. We can see the potential. Valmiki's Ramayana begins with the thief, Valmiki, who earns a living by robbing and killing others. And the sage Narada comes along to him and sees through his divine insight some potentiality. And he says, I'll stay here. Don't bind me. I give my word as a celestial being, but go home to your family, because I'm sure they don't know what your occupation is. Do they? No, they don't. Right? Find out. Tell them this is how I earn a living. And then see if they will share your sin with them. So ask them, this is how I earn my living. Obviously, it's not the most unblemished occupation. Are you prepared to share the consequences of my actions? He went and did that. Not one of them did, but they were prepared to accept all the things that came their way that were the result of his occupation. Now, of course, if somebody is robbing somebody, then justice has to come in. But there's a wonderful example. Sharada Devi was making her way to Dakshinaswar, and she was left behind, and there was a robber and his wife who came. Immediately she recognized this divinity. Immediately she referred to him as mother and to her as father. Him as father, her as mother, both as parents. They took him like that and escorted her to Dakshinaswar. That's where they were going. And we are told that they became great devotees of Ramakrishna. So how do we view? Normally, do we view people with a judgmental eye, or do we apply this divine insight? Because at the core, there's only this one thing, which is described as me, that is the Lord of the universe, and then also the Atman, which is the same thing, the internal divine essence and self of you is that same Lord. And so, if we can view all beings with an equal eye, a spark of fire, as well as the sun, the blazing sun is there, we're getting the last vestiges of it in the summer, and a spark of fire, will you view it with a certain equanimity? And a ruffian, as well as a kind man, somebody with rough manners, somebody who insults me even, and somebody who is kind and cultured. It's the same thing. After all, the capacity to speak, whether it's rough or refined, comes not from the individual. It's the current being used. It's a divine current. And then 15, ideas of rivalry, that is, rivalry concerning somebody's equals or superiors or inferiors and himself respectively. Jealousy, pity, and egoism quickly depart from a man who always thinks of me in all men. Language has changed again. First of all, the self in all beings, or the divine in all beings, and now as all beings, regardless of what we encounter, And then again, it comes back to in. We start off with a position looking for the divine in everything. And now then as everything, because there's no creator creation separate. The creator projected and became the creation. These ideas have to be repeated time and time again until they become absorbed habitually within us. And then the next stanza will go, ignoring the derisive smiles of one's friends. What stops us, what prohibits us is, what will people think of me? If I behave in a certain way, an unconventional way, what will people think of me? The main thing is to get rid of the egocentric position that asserts I and I'm doing everything. I'm the actor and I get the profit and I deserve. These ideas have to go completely. They're not true. They're not based on the pure mind. And they're not based on the revelations from divine insight. So our friends can say what they like. They can make fun. Make fun of what? If I truly have the attitude that the Lord is inside, even the lowest, even the highest, may I not actually make a prostration, if that's what I really truly understand and believe. So let us see what it says. Leaving aside a merely physical view, our view of the external world about people and places and objectives is purely the objective physicality of it, the material nature of it. So we have to take that and put it to one side, as well as shame, that is, self-consciousness in going against the grain. As well as shame, one should prostrate oneself on the ground before every creature, down to a chandala, a cow, a donkey, a dog. Sri Ramakrishna took this very literally. He went to the house of a low-class person, somebody who was rough, uneducated, the ruffian that we're talking about, and knowing that he couldn't do it with the other person knowing about it, at night he went and he cleaned the toilets of that person and dried it with his own hair. Imagine. Ramakrishna had no difficulty about putting this status. He was a Brahmana, the highest status, going down to the lowest. And when he meditated, he was happy to take off all the signs of his Brahmanahood. Sacred thread he was able to discard, and clothing he was able to discard. He had no personal idea of self-consciousness or shame. He was unable even to keep his cloth on. The great personality of his time, that is Rabindranath Tagore's father, he said, he made it quite clear he wasn't happy with the company of Ramakrishna because he wasn't impeccably self-consciously dressed, not like a dandy or something. So it's a remarkable, remarkable statement, this, if we can take it literally. Bowing down to a donkey may be a little dangerous. We might get a kick, so we can do it from a distance. Now, supposing we can't actually, or we feel we're not quite there, the remnant of ego is still there with us, then at least we could mentally do it. We have this wonderful external sign and symbol of recognizing the divinity in everybody else. And we recently gave a video on it for somebody. And we said, okay, this namaste, which has become a common kind of greeting now that the COVID has taken over, and handshaking is now very much taboo. We're reluctant to do that. But of course, in India, from time immemorial, there has been this sign, this namaste, which essentially is part of temple ritualism. The devotee will put this at various levels, signifying an attitude of wonder and adoration and thankfulness. In short, worship. And when we encounter somebody, it's very common. Even film stars today and world leaders are making a namaste hand gesture. But what's behind it? With a bow of the head, this is exactly what we're doing. We're recognizing this profound dimension in man. Not only in man, but it says all beings, and it's taking it and giving us examples. So let's look at some of these examples. Of course, a cow is deemed to be, in Indian culture, for example, sacred. Why? Because it represents the entire economy of a country. It supplies milk. It's a kind of curious machine. You put grass in one end, it delivers milk at the other, and is highly symbolic of divine grace flowing freely. I'm speaking to you, but it's because of the divine grace flowing that speech is enabled and thought is enabled, that hearing is enabled. The Kena Upanishad, which we concluded studying on Saturday mornings, in response to a question, what is that? Willed by whom? Does the mind work and the eyes see and the ears hear and so on? A whole list of sensory functions. And the answer is that is the mind of the mind and the eye of the eye and the ear of the ear. In other words, the inner essence of that enables it. It is the true agent, as it were. Without that being present, then nothing happens. So this is a very, very profound statement before a cow. And then the opposite, an ass. An ass is a beast of burden. We rate it less. What is interesting, yesterday I was on an island, remote island, Jersey, and there, from time to time, a ferry comes and they remove the cow livestock and move it on by ferry. And the cows are reluctant to go on there. So a donkey leads the way and the cows follow the donkey. It's a remarkable thing to see. So the donkey is not worried. He's a beast of burden. And of course, you know the old story about the donkey that is overloaded, seemingly overloaded. It comes to this, not worrying what people say. Don't worry about the derisiveness of people or what people say. We will spend a whole lifetime changing our mind if we do that and adopting an ultra-flexible attitude, which means that the other person is in command, that you are a slave to other people's opinions. A donkey, a man and a woman and a child were walking along, and the child got tired, so they put the child on the donkey until they overheard some people by the side of the road. What a selfish child, no respect for the elders. You at least let the mother have a ride on the donkey. And so they stopped and they changed places, and the mother rode on the donkey. And then it wasn't long before another group of people said, oh, see, look at that. You know, the man is leading the donkey all the way, and at least the woman can give some respite to that and put the child on as well. So the husband and the child both rode the donkey. And then again, there was more tittle-tattle. Eventually, all of them sat on the donkey. And then the next thing that people heard, oh, cruelty to animals. See this poor donkey taking all of them. So if we listen to other people like this and are concerned, what will people think? Then we'll be in trouble. This egoism then will be at the forefront. And then a dog. Sometimes the Chandala is called a dog. Sometimes we call the lower class people, the most primitive of primitive, something like a dog. A dog meaning an entity that is not trained. This is not the kind of dog that the author has in mind. The kind of dog is a wild village dog that is very thin, wild, barking at anything that is there and eating any form of scraps and rubbish that you throw at it. Whatever the form, not just human, but even these animals. The main thing is removing the physical eyes and gaining the divine insight that evokes this divinity from within. And then it goes on, 17. One should worship thus. How? With all the faculties of the mind, it mentions thought, word, and deed, till one comes to look upon all beings as myself. It's no good saying, look, I never murdered anybody, and then thinking I could just murder that person. What good is that? So the thought has to be there in a pure way. And the speech has to be there in a pure way. And the action has to be there in a pure way. This is the order of which we perform things anyway. A thought comes to mind. It's expressed in a kind of image. Some thought is there, either spoken inwardly or outwardly. And from there comes an action. There has to be an alignment. Truth, according to Patanjali Yoga Sutras in the commentary on that, truthfulness is consistency between thought, word, and deed. And all of that has to be pure. Think of God. Feel God. Express this feeling in your words, inwardly or outwardly, and do some action, some service. All of this consists of purity of mind. So to such a person, to such a man, everything is this entity Brahman, and we're switching terms now. Let's look at these terms. The personal God, me. Secondly, the Atman, the internal self within everyone and everything. And Brahman, everything now in the entire universe, the whole structure of existence, owing to the knowledge that comes of seeing the Atman in all. Now, some people say Swami Purnananda is a one-trick pony. All he says to us, and every problem that arises, see God in the person, see God in the situation, see God in it. That's all he says. And I came with a different problem, and what did he say? See God there. And sometimes varied. Feel God there. If you're all in the head and not in the heart, we may have to switch the language of that. Feel God. And if somebody says that I am a procrastinating person, or think of God, that is, see God in everything, feel God in everything, and do something then for God. If God, in whatever form you conventionally think of him or her, sitting in front of you, what will your first action be? I asked this to one person, and they said, oh, I would praise them or something like that. All right, fine. Will you not make them a cup of tea? Will you not go and give them some food? Will you not wash their feet? Will you not treat them like the most honored guest that has arrived? The truth of the matter is, wherever you look, that being is. But our attention is typically pitched elsewhere. That's the problem. And so, how do we fight our egoism? Based on what we have just learned. To see God in the persons with whom you have got dealings, whether it be family members, whether it be work colleagues, whether it be somebody in the market or the street. And that is enough. It's a simple formula. We can just imagine maybe a funny example. Some of you may have noticed that the Swami wears something like a gold rich wristwatch. Actually, it's not pure gold. But see, maybe some people think the Swami is fond of wristwatches. So that's okay. So when the Swami sees a wristwatch that he particularly likes on somebody's wrist, what may arise? Maybe it's envy that arises. Maybe there's a situation like a retreat where people rest in a dormitory and the Swami yawns and says, oh, I think I have to go to bed early, very tired. And I wait. And when everybody retires to bed, I wait for the snoring. And I have one eye open and I creep up knowing that they have left their wristwatches on the side of the table. Then supposing I approach the wristwatch and on the face of the watch, there is the face of Sri Ramakrishna or the face of Christ. What will be my reaction? Will I be able to do any harm? Will I be able to rob? Will I be able to have any egoistic position of possession? Let it be mine. Maybe I'll make a prayer. Lord, please don't show your face in this watch. Please go away for a few moments so I can steal it. So what kind of funny situation that would be? And if God agrees then to show his face exactly where I want to do something wrong, and before I do the wrong thing, the approach itself makes the vision appear there, then what will I do wrong? Nothing. Seeing God's face shining everywhere, in every person, will I have any malice toward that person? Will I shout at the person? Will I in any way harm the person in thought, in word, or in deed? None of them. The Lord, you are present, and the best service will go to you, and the best thoughts will go to you, and the best speech of praise and thanks and adoration will go to you also in actions. Everything will become sanctified if I see it in this way. And so, looking upon all beings as myself in thought, says Krishna, one should worship thus in thought, word, and deed. Well, actually go to an animal and bow down, ignoring the rise of smiles that we have read or that Krishna tells us about. That's a good way to crush your ego. How do you want to crush our ego? Prostrate before all you see. I remember doing this in Blessington Street to the horror of the assembled people. And everybody did it to everybody else also. Now that was a one-time thing for them. And so how long should we do it? Until our whole ego is crushed. This is what this passage is suggesting. And then looking upon all beings as myself in thought, word, and deed is to my mind, says Sri Krishna, the best of all methods of worship. Over the last few days, I've had the opportunity to discuss the ritualistic portions of worship. And questions to be asked, why do people do it this way? And why do some people do it that way? And what will happen if we don't do it this way or don't do it that way? I mentioned an example that I heard some time ago. There was a family who wanted a certain result and they set up a Havana fire ceremony. And they got all the ingredients that were required for the ritual. And they got the altar constructed well, and they invited guests. Only one item was missing that they had to get, a black cat. It was necessary for a black cat to be sourced and sit in a corner. Now, if you ask why and investigate it, well, the reason is, you see, when they first did this many years ago, a black cat wandered in and sat there, blinking, looking at it. And everybody thought, from here on, this has to be a requirement. We have to find a black cat and he has to sit in the corner. Otherwise, the whole thing won't work. So very often superstition comes in because we don't know the meaning of these rituals. But here is a blatant statement. The best worship, very best, of all worships ever is this: looking upon all beings as myself, in thought, word, and deed, is to my mind, says Krishna, the best of all methods of worship. And we have to take that very seriously. So there's no question here of God and his creation. God and his creation would be grammatically the possessive case. God's creation, the same thing declined in the nominative case would be God himself. So we have to take seriously in, through, as well. So when a person follows this kind of ceremonial approach, the whole of his life being dedicated to the realization of God in all creatures alike, and when a person attempts this discipline, then there's no destruction for the religion concerning me, says Krishna. Once given, for it is free from desire. What further desire can we have if we are able to see, to feel, to touch, and to respond to that divine element in everything and as everything? So the 20th stanza will say like this: my dear Uddhava, that's who Krishna is talking to, once begun, there is not the least destruction for the religion concerning me, for it is free from desire. And I have myself adjudged this religion as perfect on account of its being transcendent. What do we mean by transcendence? So I have told you before, the illustration of what is immanent, what is transcendent. I've done it by virtue of some kind of story. There was a number of shards of glass that formed a corporation. We can call that Glass Incorporated. They had a board meeting once, and they decided it wasn't fair that the sun should shine through them without any visa or tax or payment. What shall we do? So they made a decision and they put it in the minutes. They passed a resolution. The next time this sun comes and tries to shine through us, we will physically prevent it. Naturally, this was a nighttime meeting, and when the day came, the sun shone and shone through the glass, and all these pieces of glass got together and jostled each other to trying to prevent the sun shining through, and shattered each other to pieces. And the sun continued to shine. There was nothing that could stop it. So this is the same thing. When the sun shines through the glass, when the glory, the illuminator, that one without a second, that shining when all things shine, when that goes through everything and seems to animate to the extent that we take an egoist position and claim it for our own, this is called immanence, God inside everything. And then in this case, the example is inadequate because actually that same entity is as everything, the author of the glass itself. And when no glass is there, it is transcending. This transcendent position is there. So we can also look on the next two stanzas, and see how this relates to other passages in, say, the Isha Upanishad. O best of men, any trifling activity whatsoever, all the things that we take as trivial pursuit, but we don't take it like that, such as running away from fear or weeping from grief, any activity like that whatsoever that is due to fear, etc., if it is unselfishly meant for me becomes religion. And herein lies the wisdom of the wise and the cleverness of the intelligent, that in this very birth they attain me. We don't have to wait for a post-mortem condition. The real and immortal by means of something that is unreal and mortal. Something that is classified as unreal is something that changes and that comes and goes in an instant. Something that is in the realm of physicality and is therefore mortal. It dies. And so, by using that, by seeing that as a reflection, or as a front, or as a mask, or as something similar to a piece of glass, that's the wisdom of the wise when they see it in this way. The Isha Upanishad, number 6, will tell us, he who sees all beings, he sees all being in the very self and the self in all beings, feels no hatred by virtue of that realization. Yastu sarvani bhutani atmanya evana pashyati. He who sees all beings in his own self and his own self in all beings. He does not feel any revulsion or hatred or animosity or any unkind thought comes to that person. Why? Because they have this certain view of seeing the self in all, seeing God in all. And so I have no apology to make for this one-trick pony statement. See that being in all. That is the divine insight. All beings must be seen in the very self and the supreme self, God. If I think there is something apart from God and that something is bad, ideas other than worship, of course, will come. So the question of hatred, fear, anxiety, tendency to fight and remove a thing from our area, none of that will come. All these things can come only when we have got two positions. God is not all. There is something else here. If we have that position, then all these negative things will come. All these attitudes will come and they will spoil not only and obscure our own vision, but they will also not be in favor of us or others either. So all our daily activities could be sublimated, not just the attitude, but it has to translate into actions. When we start to study scriptures and imagine God's presence there in some form suitable to us, our Ishta Devata, our chosen ideal, the ideal that we love the most. So you can choose any form of God. When somebody says, is Hinduism, does it believe in many gods? Yes, for worship's sake, for worship purposes. We have the freedom to select something that we want. Then we don't see them as any different from this self. Isha Upanishad will continue, when to the man who has realized, that is this self being told about, the man of realization, all those beings to that person have become the self alone. Up to that point of understanding, the final conclusion, this is God alone and nothing else should be there. And we must keep on thinking and readjusting our thoughts and outlook until we find from the things that seem to be created, different from a creator, the undivided self, which hasn't undergone any changes whatsoever. And up to that, we must move our thought. So as a result of this realization, says the commentator, of the Supreme Self at that time, what delusion and what sorrow can there be? Sorrow and delusion can happen only to the ignorant person. And who does not perceive the seed of desire and actions, but not to the man who realizes the oneness. this oneness of the self, the divine self, the inner divine entity, the infinite invisible. And that self is pure like space, as we discovered from this last message of Krishna, like the infinite sky. The impossibility of grief and delusion having been indicated, these are the effects of ignorance. And this verse, therefore, indicates what the self that was spoken of in all those previous texts really is in its own nature. And that's a beautiful passage that is made. Beautiful passage. He has filled all, says the Upanishad. He is radiant, bodiless, invulnerable, devoid of sinews, pure, untouched by evil. He, the seer, thinker, all-pervading, self-existent, has duly distributed through endless years the objects according to their natures. And that's how that section of the Upanishad finishes. So, we can give another comic example about the oneness, and we see the dividedness due to our ignorance. Supposing there is a giant of a person, giant of a man, something like the Gulliver from Gulliver's Travels, who has to deal with the Lilliputians, small, tiny creatures. He stands in the vast ocean. You and I stand in the ocean. When we paddle, we can come up to our ankles, and then ultimately deeper and deeper, waist deep and so on. Supposing there's a big giant who stands in the sea, and the sea, all the vast oceans, they only come up to his ankles. If you ask somebody, how many continents are there? 6 or 7, whatever it is, Antarctica or Australia, Europe, Asia, North America, South America, Africa, etc. But a person standing in the Earth's ocean that only comes up to his ankles, you ask him, when you dig your toes and wriggle your toes in the mud underneath at the bottom of the sea and look out, can you tell me how many continents there are? There's only one piece of land. Our understanding of various continents is because we just see the dividedness. We ignore the fact that there's a continental shelf, or that there is a shifting earth, or that there is something that is the same everywhere and just rises above the sea from time to time, and we call this continents. As far as puppies are concerned, their eyes are closed when they're born. Their eyes open probably, I don't know, after about a week or something. So we're all spiritual puppies who open our eyes only a little slowly. And all our troubles are equivalent to an anticipation. Something like catching a person who is involved in taking leaves and tearing them up. You ask him, why are you doing this? He says, you see, I planted this plant. I planted the seeds, and I'm told that buds will form, and from that roses will come. I've been waiting. No roses have come. I'm only finding leaves. I'm trying to get rid of the leaves. We're all like that, isn't it? We're all tearing up leaves. That's our strategy in life. Not waiting for the buds to open up and for the roses to appear. Most of us are leaf smashers. Sitting with a hand under the chin, sad, with a long face. Why are you sad today? This stupid thing is producing leaves only. And I'm expecting to get a bud. But smashing the leaf would not help the sap to grow because it goes from inside. It won't help the inner growth. It won't help the plant absorb all the nutrients from the soil and take the water and make sure that it's condensed into a sap that ultimately distributes itself in its own time. We have to drop our expectation and patiently wait for this growth to happen. But we have to produce the conditions for it. Now, if we go to the 6th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, and there we'll finish off. There's a useful passage there as well. Constantly, yunyan eva evam sada tvanam yogi vigata kat vasaha. Constantly engaging the mind. Don't forget, we began this with those of pure mind. How do we make this pure? Is there a holiday for it? No. Constantly engaging the mind. The yogi who is free from taint, free from impurities, attains with ease, without struggle, the infinite bliss of contact with Brahman. And his mind, being harmonized by this effort for unity called yoga, he sees himself in all beings and all beings in himself. See, it is not only me that is repeating this. He sees the same in all. He who sees me everywhere and sees all in me, what is the use of this? We personalize it. Seeing God and his angels in all glorious array, using the full capacity of our imagination and creativity, there we see the Lord of the universe. If you are a husband with a wife, see the wife as the divine mother of the universe. Prostrate before her. And if you are a wife, see the glorious Lord of the universe, bedecked in golden jewels, and prostrate before him. If you have children, see them as manifestations, see them as small versions of the Lord of the universe, bedecked, running, playing, growing. Don't think that it is your contribution that has made them like this. You were only an instrument, and your body was only instrumental in it, and your mind too. See the language, it's your mind, something belonged to you. What is that you at depth? It's the Lord of the universe, and the same everywhere. With that quiet attitude, without any combat, without any reaction, see how this glory gets spread everywhere, and see how this perfection and fullness gets manifested from within and has a transformation that you never even suspected was there. And so it never becomes lost to me. He sees me everywhere and sees all in me, personal God. He never becomes lost to me, and nor do I become lost to him. And he who is established in oneness worships me, dwelling in all beings. That yogi, that serious devotee lives in me, whatever may be his mode of life, whether it is as a clerk or a housewife or a student or a Swami, whatever his mode of life. So these are relevant chapters concerning the subject of divine insight. May that Lord of Oneness bless us all, give us equilibrium of mind. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Peace, peace, peace be unto all.